They didn't think I'd show. That was clear from the moment I saw the envelope. It had my full name printed on it, Major General Eliza Ward, like they'd pulled it from an old list without thinking. As if I hadn't stopped being just Eliza to them a long time ago. The card was thick and cream-colored, with gold lettering along the edge and sealed carefully. Too carefully. I already knew what it said before I opened it. My sister was getting married. To Captain Marcus Reed. The man I pulled out of a blown-out Humvee during a blackout op 6 years ago. The man who once whispered, "I owe you everything," while blood soaked through his uniform and I held his hand, waiting for medevac. I sat at my desk staring at the envelope, flipping it between my fingers. The invitation wasn't warm. It was more like a dare. Like they were checking if I had it in me to walk into a room full of people who had written me off a long time ago. And the note inside, signed in my mother's handwriting, only said one thing: behave. The wind outside my quarters knocked the flagpole hard enough to make it groan. The room around me was still, everything in its place. Uniforms hung evenly. My boots lined up like always. I hadn't needed a personal touch in years. Order had always been easier than belonging. There was a knock on the door sharp twice. Lieutenant Carr stepped in without waiting, eyes flicking to the invitation still in my hand. He said nothing at first, just sat across from me like he always did when he sensed something was off. "You gonna go?" he asked after a minute. I didn't look up. "Would you?" He leaned back in the chair, thoughtful. "Depends. Are you going to start a fight? Or are you going to end one?" I gave a small laugh. "Maybe I just want to watch one." "Then go," he said simply. "But don't wear your medals like armor. Wear them like they belong to you. Make them remember." That stayed with me long after he left. I stared out the narrow window above my desk, watching a fresh group of recruits stumble through a drill. Their voices were full of fire, the kind I used to have before I learned how much silence could cost. I stood and went to the closet, pulled out my dress uniform, smoothed it over the bed like it was something sacred. I hadn't worn it since my father's funeral. I wasn't invited to speak that day. There hadn't even been a seat left for me in the front row. My mother had sat between my sister Hannah and my uncle like the military in me didn't count. Like I'd brought shame to their version of grief just by showing up in uniform. I'd stood at the back, stiff and quiet, until the last note of taps faded away. That memory was sharper than I expected as I packed. I booked a one-way flight to Virginia, red-eye, connecting through Frankfurt. Quiet seat. No attention. I didn't tell my driver, didn't alert anyone at the base. I didn't want well wishes. I just wanted to show up. Uninvited, maybe, but undeniable. I landed before dawn, the terminal still half asleep, buzzing with announcements and early travelers. I walked through customs without trouble. No one questioned me, my ID still carried more weight than most. Just as I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity had a way of pulling harder than pride. "Eliza." The voice on the other end sang. "Hannah." Her tone hadn't changed. Sweet on the surface, cold underneath. "So you really came." I didn't answer. "Well, that's something. Marcus will be glad to see you." She paused. "You two always had chemistry." I stopped walking. "Don't do that." "Do what?" she asked, laughing lightly. "It's a compliment. It's a joke at my expense." She didn't deny it. "Just don't show up in full gear, okay? It's a wedding, not a parade." I ended the call without replying. The drive through Alexandria was familiar and foreign all at once. Cherry blossoms hung over sidewalks like nothing had ever gone wrong here. It was the kind of neighborhood people wrote Christmas letters from. Neat lawns, brick homes, slow-turning sprinklers. I let the rental car roll through streets I hadn't driven in years. The house hadn't changed. Same shutters, same porch swing, same sense of quiet control. When I knocked, it was my mother who answered. Her hair was pin-tight, not a single strand out of place. She wore beige and pearls, her armor of choice. She looked me up and down without a smile. "Just, please don't ruin this for her." I didn't come to ruin anything. "Then keep to yourself." That was the welcome. Inside, everything smelled like lemon polish and disapproval. The dining room table had been extended to its fullest. 14 seats. I was placed at the far end, next to the kitchen doors, out of the line of photos and away from any guests who might ask questions. No introductions were made. No acknowledgement of my rank or service. It was like I dropped in from another planet. When the wine was passed around, the server skipped me. When I asked, he said, "Non-drinking guest, right?" I didn't correct him. At dinner, Hannah raised her glass. "To love and to loyalty," she said, smiling just wide enough to bite. People laughed. My mother joined in. No one mentioned my name. Not until dessert, when Hannah turned toward me, microphone in hand, glowing in her white rehearsal dress. "And look," she said sweetly, "even my big sister made it. All the way from wherever she guards doors now." Laughter rippled across the room. A few glances came my way, unsure if they were supposed to laugh too. I set my glass down slowly. Then something shifted. Marcus stood. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He just walked across the room toward me, stopping one pace in front of my chair. Then, in front of everyone, he saluted. Clean. Sharp. Full military form. "Ma'am," he said, "please forgive my wife." The room froze. No clinking glasses, no whispers. Just silence. "This," he said, turning to face the crowd, "is Major General Eliza Ward, my former commanding officer." Gasps. Audible ones. Hannah's face went pale. The microphone slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud clunk. No one spoke. And I didn't move. I didn't have to. Marcus stood still after the salute, hand at his side, spine straight like he was back in formation. I stayed seated. Not because I was frozen or afraid, but because I wanted them all to sit with it. That moment. That truth. Let them feel what it was like to be the one shrinking for a change. Around the room, faces twitched. Old neighbors, distant cousins, Hannah's bridesmaids in matching blush satin. They all tried to figure out what they were supposed to do next. Smile? Applaud? Apologize? No one moved. Even the string quartet in the corner had gone silent, their bows hovering awkwardly over strings. My mother stood slowly, knocking over a half-full flute of champagne. "Eliza," she began, her voice tight, like she was trying to pull the evening back into order. But the words faltered. "This is not the time." But no one looked at her. All eyes were still on me. Or Marcus. Or the empty space between us where 1,000 unsaid things hung heavy. Then from near the bar someone stood. A man in his late 50s, solid build, sharp eyes. Colonel Avery, retired but still carried himself like he could step back into command at any moment. He raised his hand and offered me a slow, deliberate salute. Nothing flashy. Just a gesture full of memory. Another man stood next. General Patel. Followed by a woman with short gray hair and steady hands who had clearly spent years in uniform too. They didn't say anything. Just lifted their hands and saluted. One by one. No music. No speeches. Just recognition. The room couldn't pretend anymore. Hannah sat down heavily, blinking like she couldn't find the right reality to hold on to. My mother didn't sit. But she didn't speak again either. I stood then, not fast, not for drama, just so no one could miss it. I nodded once to Marcus, who returned to his seat without a word. Then I left the ballroom. Outside, the night was warm and strangely quiet for a city wedding. I walked down a side path lit by hanging lanterns and made my way to a small courtyard behind the venue. I needed space. Not to cry. Not to rage. Just to breathe without holding my body tight. A few minutes later, the door creaked behind me. I didn't turn. "Eliza," my mother said. I turned only slightly, not enough to meet her eyes. "Don't." She stepped forward anyway. "You humiliated your sister. She did that herself. You could have stopped it from going that far." I did. Her mouth pressed into the line I'd known since childhood, sharp, practiced, impossible to move. She tried again. "I only meant." "No," I interrupted. "You meant to keep everything in its place. Me especially." A silence stretched between us. She smoothed the front of her blouse. "The media is asking questions. They can ask. We weren't prepared for a scene. That's because you didn't expect me to have a voice." That stung. I saw it. But she didn't deny it. "I came because I was invited," I said calmly. "Not to be mocked. Not to be erased. Again." "Eliza." You erased me the first time when you didn't save me a seat at Dad's funeral. When you let people believe I was just some distant cousin. When you told everyone I made you uncomfortable. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You just used different words. Her fingers trembled slightly at her sides. For once she had nothing left to polish. I didn't wait for her to fill the silence. I walked away. Later that night Hannah texted me. Just 4 words. Can we talk tomorrow? I stared at the screen. I thought about ignoring it. But the curiosity was still there, mixed with something that felt like unfinished business. The next morning we met at a cafe near the hotel. It was the kind of place made for apology attempts. Quiet music, soft chairs, overpriced coffee. Hannah wore oversized sunglasses indoors. I sat across from her, still in the same plain slacks and button-up shirt I wore to travel. She pulled off her glasses slowly and cleared her throat. That was dramatic, she said. I didn't respond. She shifted in her seat. Look, I went too far. It was a joke. The whole gate guard thing. No. That's the problem. I cut in. You don't think. You just perform. She rolled her eyes. That's not fair. Isn't it? I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. I slid them across the table. She glanced down, confused. Then froze. What is this? She asked. A complaint sent anonymously to a military review board 7 years ago, accusing me of falsifying deployment reports, undermining my credibility. Her eyes narrowed. That could be from anyone. It was run through a linguistic analysis system, used by intelligence for authorship tracking. 95% match. And it flagged one phrase that gave it away completely. She didn't move. Irregardless, I said. You always used it. Even in middle school essays. Hannah sat still, her fingers curling around the coffee cup that had gone cold. You sent that, I said. You tried to take my career from me. She looked away. I was angry. Because I got attention. Because Dad was proud of me. Because I didn't need this family to feel real. I just wanted space, she said, almost too quietly. You took up all of it. So you tried to bury me, I said. So you could shine brighter. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. I burned anyway, I added. We didn't talk after that. I stood and left her sitting there. Her coffee untouched. Her mask slipping. I didn't go back to the hotel. I walked the city instead. Down quiet blocks and crowded sidewalks. Letting everything catch up to me without crashing into me. It wasn't revenge I felt. Just clarity. Later that night, I found Marcus standing alone on the rooftop bar. He looked out over the skyline like he wasn't sure what he'd done by marrying into that world. I figured you'd find me up here, he said. I figured you'd be here too. He glanced at me. You want to talk about Hellman? I shook my head. Not really. He nodded. Fair. There was a long pause. Then he said, she never knew what you did. I never told her about the minefield. Why? Because I knew she'd turn it into her story. Twist it into something convenient. He looked tired. Not physically. Just the kind of tired you carry in your soul when you've spent too long pretending something's okay. You saved my life, he said. And I watched them spend years pretending you didn't exist. I wanted to believe they were just complicated. But now I know they were cruel. And you married into it anyway. Because it felt clean. Ordered. Like it made sense. Until it didn't. I let the silence answer that one. I stood up for you last night, he said quietly. Because if I didn't, I'd become one of them. I nodded slowly. Then don't ever use my name to protect yours again. He didn't promise. But he understood. The night felt softer after that. Not because anything was fixed, but because I'd stopped carrying what wasn't mine. And I wasn't finished yet. The morning after the rooftop conversation, I didn't wake up to guilt or confusion. I woke up feeling something sharper: resolve. Not the angry kind that burns out fast, but the steady kind that lets you see things clearly. I packed my bag without rushing. Every fold felt like closure. The uniform stayed in the garment bag, untouched. I didn't need it anymore to make a point. As I zipped up my case, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from a number I did recognize. Barbara. I let it ring twice before answering. Eliza, she said. No small talk. No apology. Just my name spoken softly, like she wasn't sure how it would land. Didn't expect to hear from you again so soon, I replied, sitting down at the edge of the bed. Can we meet? Why? I'd like to speak. Just the two of us. Not about the wedding. About everything else. There was a pause. Then she added, please. That word had never come easy to her. It wasn't much, but it was something. We met in the hotel lounge, the kind with velvet chairs and lighting too dim for anything honest. A waiter brought coffee neither of us touched. Barbara sat straight-backed, pearl earrings on, though her lipstick was faded and one side of her blouse hadn't been ironed. That alone told me she wasn't here for performance. You certainly made an impression, she said. I didn't plan to. You all gave me the stage. She tried a smile. It didn't stick. The media attention hasn't been ideal, she continued. Not for you. She didn't argue. Look, she said finally. I didn't come to fight. I came to ask for your help. People are talking. They're asking questions. About Haley's remarks. About Marcus's salute. About your background. You mean my career? Yes. What about it? Barbara lowered her voice, glancing around even though no one was listening. Could you give a short statement? Something the press can use. Just to clarify that this wasn't a family issue. That everything is fine. I blinked. You want me to issue a press release? To make this less uncomfortable for you? She leaned forward slightly. Just some context. Not a lie. Just keep things from escalating. I laughed, but it was quiet and cold. You want me to protect the family name again? Barbara sat back. I was protecting the family. No, I said, voice calm. You were protecting yourself. You erased me because it was easier than standing beside me. The silence that followed wasn't angry, just hollow, like a room where all the furniture had been cleared out. She reached for her coffee but didn't drink. Her hands trembled faintly now. You have no idea how hard it was, she whispered. Being your mother and not knowing how to defend your choices. I wore a uniform, I said. I served my country. I got promoted on merit. That needed defending. You were loud, Eliza. In a world that punished loud women. I didn't know how to make you fit. I wasn't loud, I replied. I was visible. She looked down. I thought if we distanced you, she went on, people would forget the issues. I thought we could all just move on. You didn't erase me, I said. You made me unforgettable. She swallowed hard. The pearls at her neck suddenly looked too tight. Is there anything I can do now? She asked. I paused, then said, yes. Don't rewrite my story when I'm gone. If people ask why I don't come home, don't say it was complicated. Don't say I was distant. Tell them you made a choice. And so did I. Barbara nodded slowly. She reached out almost reflexively, maybe for my hand, maybe for the daughter she used to know, but I didn't take it. I stood up. I have to go. She didn't stop me. As I walked out of the lounge, I passed a large mirror near the elevator. I looked at myself, not the medals, not the ribbons. Just the face. I didn't look tired. I looked real. And that was enough. I wasn't planning to see Hannah again. But she caught me in the cafe just past the lobby, sunglasses on again, her steps slower than usual. She asked if she could sit. I didn't say yes, but I didn't stop her either. I didn't sleep much, she said, trying to sound casual. I nodded. She shifted uncomfortably. Mom said she talked to you. She did. She's in full damage control mode, I assume? Always. Silence hung between us. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded letter. What's that? I asked. My apology. I waited. I wrote it this morning, she said. I don't expect you to read it now. Or ever, really. I needed to say it. Not out loud. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I didn't touch the envelope. But I didn't reject it either. I know what I did, she added. Not just the letter to the board. But all of it. The jabs. The silence. The cruelty dressed as charm. Why now? I asked. She thought for a second. Because last night when Marcus stood up and then those officers did too, I realized the version of you I made fun of never existed. You weren't a threat to me. I was just scared you'd make me irrelevant. And did I? She shook her head. No. You just reminded me I hadn't earned what I was given. That I wasn't expecting. You don't need to forgive me, she said. But I hope one day you stop thinking of me as someone who buried you. I finally picked up the envelope, folded it once, slid it into my coat pocket. I already stopped, I said. She didn't cry, but her lip trembled like she might. That was enough for now. Later that day, a call came through from a Pentagon liaison. Short, direct. They wanted to discuss a new policy initiative. Something about protective resources for military personnel affected by personal sabotage. I smiled to myself as I ended the call. They were late, but they were listening. I spent that evening alone in my hotel room, sketching ideas on the back of a hotel notepad. I wasn't sure what it would be called yet or how it would work, but I knew what it needed to stand for: resilience, protection, visibility. No more whispered takedowns behind closed doors. If they wanted to erase us, we'd write ourselves in bold. The next morning, I boarded my flight quietly, dressed in plain clothes. Civilian for the first time in a long time. At the gate, a woman in uniform stood ahead of me. Young, nervous, probably new. She looked back at me, then did a double take. Her eyes widened slightly. "General Ward?" she asked quietly. "Just Eliza," I replied. She hesitated, then said, "I read your speech. The one at the academy." I smiled. "Good. Now write your own someday." She nodded, face flushed with pride. That was the moment I realized legacy wasn't a medal or a ceremony. It was how the next person walked when they saw you stand. And I was just getting started. The sun over Washington had barely cleared the skyline when I stepped into the hall. The briefing room wasn't grand, but it carried weight. The kind that came with sealed doors, rows of brass-lined chairs, and more decision-makers than cameras. They called it a round table, but everyone knew it wasn't meant for conversation. It was meant for direction. Behind me, a screen glowed with one simple phrase: Resilience Protection Protocol. I stood alone at the podium, no notes, just a copy of the proposal folded once in my inside pocket. My voice didn't need preparation. It had been built over years of silence and too many rooms that asked me to shrink. "The military has always trained us to survive battle," I began. "But it's never trained itself to protect us from betrayal." No one shifted. No one interrupted. "We've created programs for trauma, for grief, for injury, but not for the kind that comes dressed as family. Not for the wound that doesn't bleed but stains everything anyway." I clicked to the next slide. Complaints buried. Promotions stalled. Mental health markers misused as tools of dismissal. I showed numbers, then stories, names redacted but truths exposed. For every soldier like me who stood back up, there are dozens who never had the chance. Not because they weren't strong, but because someone close made sure they were silenced. Someone in the front cleared his throat. A general whose ribbons went shoulder to shoulder. He looked uneasy. Good. Unease meant they were listening. "This isn't a personal grievance," I said, letting my voice drop just slightly. "This is structural. This is national security. If you don't protect the people who serve, you lose more than manpower. You lose morale. You lose truth." A younger officer raised his hand. "What's the ask?" "Three-tier protocol," I replied. "Legal support for internal sabotage. Psychological services not controlled by immediate chains of command. And career shielding while investigations are underway. No more quiet retirements because someone's spouse filed an anonymous complaint to gain custody or control. No more daughters written off to save dinner parties." The silence that followed was thick but not tense. Just heavy with weight they couldn't deflect. I ended with this. "I was once told family should never be the enemy. But no one told me what to do when family chose to be." When I stepped back, I didn't expect applause. This wasn't a stage. But a woman at the back, civilian suit, mid-40s, hard lines around her mouth, nodded once. That nod meant more than a standing ovation. After the briefing, as the room emptied, one of the aides caught up to me. "They've approved early funding," she whispered. "You'll chair the task force if you want it." I didn't answer her right away. I just walked outside. It was spring in DC again. Soft light on stone walls and quiet cherry blossoms lining the reflecting pool. I remembered walking here once in cadet uniform, proud and naive. I wasn't naive anymore. But I was proud in a new way. The press had already spun the wedding incident into headlines. They called it the salute heard around the room. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The clip spoke louder than any quote ever could. Still, requests kept coming. TV spots, magazine features, even an interview offer from a major morning show. I declined all of them. Instead, I flew to Naples. From there, I took a small boat along the coast. Just me, a week-old duffel, and a promise to myself that I'd step away before the noise replaced the message. I found a cottage nestled above the cliffs, far enough from the village that the waves were the only soundtrack. The windows faced the sea. The light hit the floors just right in the afternoon. I painted in the mornings. Nothing special, just color on canvas. In the afternoons I wrote letters, notes, thoughts I hadn't had time for. The pages filled fast, not with stories of war but with what came after. One day, a boy from the village brought a basket to my door. Bread, olives, a folded newspaper I hadn't asked for. He looked up at me with wide, curious eyes and asked in halting English, "Were you really a general?" I smiled. Once. Now I'm just someone who fought for herself. He seemed satisfied with that. That night, I sat on the terrace with my journal open and a glass of wine untouched beside it. My old army phone buzzed. I still carried it. Habit maybe. Or memory. The voice message was from Simmons, now General Simmons. "Eliza," he said, steady as always, "the president wants to meet. They're forming a new advisory board. Ethics. Transparency. Your name's at the top of the list." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. It wasn't because I was done. It was because I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for titles. Not for permission. I pulled the journal closer and wrote the final line. I walked alone. But I never walked away. The ink dried slow in the amber light. I closed the book, locked it in a drawer beside old medals and faded lanyards I didn't need anymore. Then I stood, opened the doors and stepped out. The sea stretched wide and endless. No audience. No stage. Just the sound of someone who once vanished now standing in full view. Not to prove anything but to live. And that, after everything, was the real victory.